Good day, everyone. Today we are on the All Means All chat show, and with me I have a panel of experts. And this panel of experts, they are the gurus in formative assessment. And so, you know, we've heard about this formative assessment. We've heard that people have so much difficulties implementing it, doing it in their classrooms, and with good reason. Because if you think about it, you have a classroom with diverse learners, diverse learning needs, they come from different backgrounds, and the idea is that we want to create this safe learning environment where everybody's included. How does this happen, right? And this is what we're going to chat about today. And the beautiful thing, students, there are student teachers that we are talking today, so all your advice will go to them. The issue that we have is, how must they do this? How can they do it? And you're going to give them all the tips, so wait for it. There's going to be a lot of good things that you can learn about today. But first of all, we need to know, what is this formative assessment? So Vana, as one of our experts from Greece, we have an international panel here. So Vana can you maybe tell us about what is formative assessment?
Oh, formative assessment is an ongoing process that is taking place during the instruction, while learning is taking place, while learning is occurring. Its primary goal is to give information, valuable information and feedback to teachers as well as to learners about students' learning progress, where they are and what are their needs during the instruction. So we can say that it aims to identify the areas that needs improvement during the instruction.
Yeah, and so that's a good example. But I mean, what is the need for formative assessment? Because you know, teachers would want to do the other summative assessment. You write your exam, you get the grade, it's over and done with. Why do we need to do this formative assessment that people really don't like, that have a little bit of a fear of doing? What is the need?
A formative assessment can communicate clear, precise and specific learning goals to students. It can give information and valuable feedback both to students and to teachers about their learning progress, as I said before. That means that the teachers can have a good picture of the diverse needs of their students, and they can adjust their instruction to the students' diverse needs and to cover their needs during the instruction. So usually it's not graded, but it gives the information that it's needed in order to adjust the instruction to their needs. Also, it can help in self-monitoring. It can help students to self-monitor their learning and to take their own responsibility on their learning. That's important to have. If it's implemented, if formative assessment is implemented continuously, systematically, it can provide both teachers and students with valuable information during the instruction.
So what I hear you say, this is not just a teacher thing, learners are involved in this as well. How they reflect on what they learn and their self-assessment of where am I to where I was, or compared to my peers maybe. That's good information. But you know, we have these students that are confused, that are going out to teach, and as we know, sometimes they don't know, they might not know who these learners are in front of them. So they're going to a school and they're going to be there for a month, and unlike other teachers, what is it that teachers need to know first? Melika, can you maybe tell us about this? What do they need to know?
Yes, firstly, teachers need to know the readiness level of their students. The readiness level is how much information, understanding, or skills their students have. If teachers know their students' readiness, they can arrange their instruction accordingly. Teachers make the connection between prior knowledge and the new content and make connections easily. And also know about whether students have misconceptions or not. How much students know about the topic before teachers make a direct instruction, because students are not blank slates, they come to class with some experience. So first of all, teachers need to assess students' readiness level. But it is not stop here. Teachers also need to assess students' interest, because interest motivates students to learn new things, new content, provoke their involvement in the course. For example, teachers connect math with their daily lives, building, stock market, science, and also even with arts and poem. They can connect literature topics with daily life, history, art. In this way, students learn easily. They can learn students' interest in science about and make connections with politics, daily events, and also with math. In this way, learning becomes more permanent and construct on the prior knowledge. This is not enough. Also, teachers need to learn about learning profiles of their students, because students are different in their preferences about learning environment, cognitive styles, and also preference for multiple intelligence. Some of them learn verbally, some of them auditory, kinesthetic, some of them prefer to work in silent environments, some of them prefer to study in music. Some of them want to learn individually, or some of them want to learn in groups. So teacher wants to learn about students' learning profiles. In general, as a teacher, we need to know about students' readiness, how much information they know, what are their interests to provoke their motivation and involvement in the course, and their learning profiles, how they prefer to learn in groups, individually, what kinds of learning environment and cognitive styles they prefer. For example, if you define your students first, what is the stressful way for them? For example, for verbal, you need to make instruction accordingly. But at the same time, you need to have ways for students who are learning kinesthetically, who are learning verbally, visually. In the same time, there should be different teaching processes in the class. For example, one of your students may tell that I want to work in groups. Others may tell that I want to work individually. As a teacher, an experienced teacher should manage all of their wishes as much as possible. That is the thing. Because we need to differentiate both assessment and the learning process. Because assessment affects learning process affects the product or assessment process.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think it's interesting when you look at Vygotsky's circles. If you are in your comfort zone, it's a good thing to start with. Suppose you are sharing the learning intentions, and then you know a little bit of what kind of task you would like to do. But it's also good to make the next step to the zone of proximal development before becoming in the panic zone. That they make sometimes a step. Suppose you don't want to work in a group, you should do, because the society asks you to collaborate sometimes, which what we are doing now, for instance. But starting with your comfort zone, and then with one leg in your comfort zone, making the next step.
Yeah.
So it's also a little bit of first matching and then stretching, I think.
Yeah.
But first, it's still about you have to know your students, and they have to be aware of their own learning profile. Is that? That's what you mean, I think.
For example, some students never can study in a music environment, but some students prefer to work in a music environment. For example, while studying math, I want a silent environment. But for example, studying literature or history, they are social sciences. I can work in a music environment. It changes according to courses and it changes according to students.
The idea is that we first see students holistically and inclusively, and then we say, okay, so where are possible needs that may be different to others, some have the same, and then we adjust to it, as you were saying. So we always make sure that it is not just the one, or let me say, what we do not want is to exclude learners in any way because of how they prefer to learn or how, whatever their needs are. So the idea, that's why the point that we are making is safe, you can be who you are, inclusive learning environment, so that the environment is the one that is pushing you. Yeah, as you're saying, my teacher knows me, that is a good thing. So my teacher knows what I can do. My teacher will not push me to a point that I cannot, but the teacher is going to guide me to expand my horizons. That's why you're in school. That's the whole point of being in school, that we also prepare learners for an environment outside where they will be likely in, because it is what it is. And so, and you were correctly saying that you have to know them, and it's good that you know their styles, because, as you say, sometimes you want to learn with music, and it's also even what music would you like to hear. I like music and I love jazz, and when I'm working and I have jazz, it must be instrumental jazz, because if it's songs, I'll be singing and then I'm not making progress. So you kind of learn, you kind of get to know yourself. And so it's good that we know all these things about our learners, but we must always make sure that they are included. Yavanna?
If I can contribute to this discussion, is that when you know your students, when you know their needs, when you know their profiles, when you know how they learn and what they prefer, their interests, their background, the teachers can create different, diverse, multiple, let's say, means of formative assessment. So the students themselves can choose, they can have the independence to follow probably different paths, diverse paths to show what they have learned. Yeah. So you know that someone is better prefers more to listen than writing, but you can give multiple means and he or she can choose the path that prefers this time to show what he or she knows. Yeah.
And that reminds me of the tic-tac-toe, where you have 9 activities with assessing similar knowledge or content or strategies or skills with differences, and the learners get to choose which ones they want to do. So it could be those who like listening and music can go to there, but you're going to also say, and you have to do some writing as well. Yeah. You didn't, because that is what you have to choose 3, and you get to choose 3. But you might want them to, they might want to go just, but the choices are there. So that gives them, as you were saying, gives them choices as well. But, and this, yeah, I'm going to feel comfortable. Yeah, I'm not going to be so comfortable, but I know I'm going to do it. So that, again, addresses your issue.
And also the aim is to understand how much our students learn, how much deficiencies they have, and we need to support them. So if your students are learning mathematical, logical intelligence type, you can arrange puzzles or problem-solving activities to show their learning. If they are visual, they can draw some graphs or maps. If they are verbal, they can explain their understanding about the content by talking, presentations maybe. You can differentiate your assessment ways if you know your students' learning profiles, interests and readiness.
Now that was a lot of information. and teachers might think, oh my goodness, I have to know all of that? But I don't know of a grade 1 learner that wants to know about the stock exchange, but I do know they might want to learn about the dinosaurs, so that would be their interest. And they might not be ready for politics, but definitely how to count before they do the mathematics. And the teacher needs to know, who is this child? Is this a shy child? Is this an outgoing child? What is it that we need to do? So don't worry, that is a lot of information. So there is, you have different learners and you can say, oh yes, my learner's like that. Oh, so you have picked some things that Melika said that is relevant to your class. So think about that, and it's always good to know, because you are right when you say, when you start with what they like and what they know, they're more eager to learn. Yeah. And that's our main aim, isn't it? So great. So now we know what formative assessment is. We've discovered what is the need for it. We say, okay, now the basis, Melika's given us the basis. Now, how can we put this in practice? How does all of this relate to the important strategies that teachers need to know in the classroom? Janneke, maybe you can tell us about it. By the way, Janneke is from the Netherlands and Melika is from Turkey. International group, I told you, yeah?
Yeah, I can tell about it, and it's a little bit repeating research from someone else, which the big guru, the real big guru, he isn't here, but anyway, Dylan William, he created 5 big formative assessment strategies. However, I still think it's all about good teaching and knowing your students. So we can make it pretty difficult, but it's still about know your students and be a good teacher. But when it comes to his 5 big strategies, the first one is about where are we going to? What are we going to learn? And that's the same what you said. It should be connected to students' interest. Yeah. Why are we going to learn this? Why is this interesting? Why? The big why. And what we also know, also from John Hattie, one of the other gurus, that students most of the time don't know how to be successful. And we are still in the forming phase. It's formative assessment. It's not a summative test, so we are learning, developing. So the first thing is discuss with your students, why are we learning this? What's the big idea behind it? But how to be successful. Suppose you have to write an essay. It's a big thing. But what's a good essay? You can compare and contrast to different essays from different quality. And you can discuss with your students, which one is the best? What are the criteria? What are the success criteria? So then they know where to go. And I think that's the main thing. And normally, if it's even me, I teach students, but still, then on your first slide on the PowerPoint, you put your learning objectives. At the end of this course, at the end of this lesson, you will be able to pop, 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 pop. Not meaningful at all. So you should do something else, be creative, how to do this. Because this will be your backbone for the next 4 strategies, which is knowing where your students are in their learning. What's their prior knowledge related to the big topic? If they start their lovely activities you created, how far are they? How to make their learning visible? Use questions, talk with them. But the challenge is you have to see them all in one go, which is a challenge, which is difficult. But we do have different techniques for it. If they start working and you know where they are, then you can provide feedback as a teacher. difficult thing sometimes, but anyway, we have examples from it later on. But maybe even better, and less time consuming for the teacher, always a good thing I suppose, you can tell your students to provide feedback for each other, the peer assessment thing, or they can do a sort of self-assessment thing based on the success criteria. So this is the thing, but still always based on the first strategy, where are we going to, how far are we, and what will be the next step? I think this is in sort of nutshell the 5 big strategies.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is that everybody has a role in this, and it's not a one-man show, it's a one-woman show, and everybody has to contribute. So all learners, they are not, as you said, they're not passive, they're not empty vessels, they contribute. They need to reflect. And the good thing that you said, because remember people have this thing about formative assessment, it is a lot more work. Magic word, learners support each other, peer assessment. And I think that is a good, especially, always coming from a teacher, I'm wrong, that's not right, or whatever. Each other is like, yeah, I can take it from you, you're my peer. And so if teachers can find ways in which that happens, because that also means that at the same time, their learners are learning, because not only did they have to think about what they wrote, they have to, let's say, what is a good word, examine or judge someone else's work. So they have to critically think, is this good enough? Is this, so that, I mean, it says it itself.
Svana said, being responsible for their own learning and from their peers.
Exactly.
So everyone will be engaged.
And so this being the owners of their own learning brings us to this metacognition. Thinking about their thinking about their learning. Did I learn? And it's not just like, tell me if I'm right or wrong. Yeah? And so if we get students to do that, they are sure to make corrections to their work before they hand it in, because they'll have to read critically. So that is where we want them to be. Great. So you can really see that formative assessment is going to bring us far, and we can use it constructively, and it is not this big work that we think it is. So now we're going to go practical, because this is what the students were waiting for. So we're going to, again, as I said, students, teachers think about this as a big thing that takes a long time. But wait, our gurus are going to tell us short formative assessment techniques that are quick indicators and have high impact, and you'll be able to see it with your whole class. Melike is going to tell us about one of those techniques.
Okay, mostly teachers think about that formative assessment takes much time from classroom instruction, but teachers use some of the strategies which will save them time and reveal students' learning level. For example, teachers may observe their students' hand signals. For example, one finger means that students are not confident enough about the content. 2 fingers may mean that students are confident about the content, but they need more practice about the content. And 3 fingers means that they are quite confident about the content and they can teach to their peers the content. An alternative to this is a thumbs up, thumb sideways and thumb down to indicate with how much they are confident or they need extra help from the teachers or from their peers.
As easy as 1, 2, 3. Cannot be easy. You look at your class and you look at those fingers and you look at the thumbs and you have an immediate feedback that where they are, and you will know as a teacher what to do next. Great. Janneke, do you have a quick tip for us?
Yeah, also very simple. So, these are the mini whiteboards. You can buy them, but you can even use a blank paper, but the mini whiteboard you can erase. And if you ask for one clear answer, not a whole story, just one answer, suppose you teach math or you want to have a word or a definition, then you can ask your students, write it down, and when I say yes, raise your mini whiteboard, and then you can see it in one go from all the students. And if the students look around, they can see it from the peers as well. So it's also based on how to do this in a quick way.
Yeah. Because, I mean, that prevents the teacher from having to walk around the class to see if everybody did it right, if everybody puts it up there. And as you say, they can look at each other. And I mean, if I think about it, if you're going to do some multiple quiz questions, and you don't want to, you're not going to mark it, you just want to see, do they know the answers right now? And it's like, you have an A, B, C, D, and you go like, so here are the strategies, you might have it on the board or whatever, here, this is the question, give me the correct answer. And they do that, and you can check quickly. Yeah, I think it's a very good system, a very good technique. Vanna, do you have, because this is like, oh, this is so good that we have these good techniques. Do you have a good technique for us as well?
Both you and Yannick referred to self-assessment. Self-assessment is a very good type of formative assessment that helps students to self-assess themselves, how it can be done. The teacher, for example, can ask students to write a story or to create something, and then she or he can create a checklist with different statements and ask the students to tick the statements that reflect more their understanding, or can create rubrics with success-based criteria and ask them to complete it. It's important that the teacher to define the criteria before and to teach the students how to use it in order to reflect more easily on their understanding, and also to the teacher to have the useful information needed to use this information as a force, let's say, to adjust the instruction and to make a decision for the instruction.
I like this because, again, this takes, it's not let me not say old, this whole idea of summative assessment. I'm here to test you and of what you know and what you don't know. You start at the saying, it's clear, this is what this task should have. You do the checklist. When you're working, you have to say, do I know this? If I only write this, I may only get this grade. And it's clear the criteria, as you say, the rubric will have all the strategies or all the criteria needed. And based on that, the learner should look at it and say, I cannot expect an A if I did not do that, and that. Did I do that? What do I need to do more? So already that is self-assessing themselves, even before they started. And again, once they get feedback, they can recheck to see what is. So I really like that. It makes our learners think more critically, yeah? So that is a very good strategy. But guys, we are in the digital age now. We're doing 4IR, 5IR. We want to push to the digital, because this is the digital world. This is where our learners live in. You know, they are used to putting things on TikTok and you know, they are constantly assessing what is happening in the world, in the digital world. Why are we using digital? Are there digital techniques that we can use that will make it a little easier for the teacher, as well as more accessible for learners? Because, you know, that sounds more exciting than just little papers and so on. So, Janneke, you were talking about this whiteboard that they can hold up. do we have a digital?
Yeah, we also have a digital alternative, which is Padlet, and with even more options when you compare to the mini whiteboard. But I have to say, I think my student teacher will be more handy to use it compared to me, to be honest. It should be easy for the teachers, but especially for this new generation. But anyway, the Padlet is, and you have a big board, and you can put your digital sticky notes, post-its on it. So you can use it for your short answers, but even for longer answers. And one of the benefits as well is you can do it also in an anonymous way. So then it's probably, depending on where you are in the learning process and what you want to check, it's more safe sometimes for some students. Because of course you are allowed to make mistakes, but sometimes it's still a little bit difficult to make mistakes. Thinking, oh, okay, I'm a little bit ashamed.
Yeah.
And if you use the Padlet, it's a very safe alternative compared to the mini whiteboard.
Yeah, and the brilliance of that is, if compared to the original whiteboard, the old school whiteboard, you had to, if you wanted to see what the others' answers were, you had to turn around to look at what they're doing. Now with this, whatever you put up, it goes on the board and they can see, oh, so many got it correct, and maybe these, they don't know who, and the beauty, as they say, they don't know who it is. So that is a nice thing, and it's more visual, as you say, and learners can really put their feelings with using or whatever how they feel about the activity. If the teacher says, tell me what you learned from here, and they can actually put it down and everybody sees it, and that's brilliant. Melika, do you have a digital technique for us that we could use in formative assessment?
Yes, for formative assessment, I want to mention about student response systems like Kahoot, Socrative, Quizzes, Quizlet. These are game-based platforms. Students like their cell phones to use every day in every occasion. So you can, as a teacher, let them use their cell phone to learn. You can use Kahoot, for example, to identify how much students learn about the topic, how much they need to learn, in what parts of the course they are better, but in which parts of the course they need more support. As a teacher, you give students homework or pre-assessment task before the course. But most of the students don't study them from course book and come to class to learn the new topic. But before the course, you can use Kahoot or other student response system to assess whether they learn the necessary information from the course book or not, in a very easy and fun way. And also in classes, students generally don't want to take part in the discussions or question and answer sections because of public fear or embarrassment. But through the use of student response system, students don't need to use their name. They can use a nickname and can self-assess their learning level. Their misconceptions about the topic. And also they can evaluate their learning and assess their learning relative to their peers. How much their peers learn and how much they learn, and they can think that I need to study with my friends, or I get all the things important for the course. Student response system, in other words, I want to tell, support self-assessment and peer assessment, as my friends talk about.
And the word cahoots means getting together and, I know something that you don't know. Usually when people are in cahoots, maybe it's not always a positive thing, but in this way it's like we are doing things together. I'm just a comment on the word, because when you were saying that they can learn from each other, so it reminded me of the word cahoots. So, Vanna, Do you have something to tell us? There's more. Vanna will tell us more. Just in terms of digital techniques that we could use?
As you said before, we all use technology every day in our lives, and students do so. And podcasts could be a very interesting type of formative assessment. They could be used in formative assessment. They are usually audio episodes, but the teacher could ask the students to create podcasts on specific topics they have worked in the classrooms, and this podcast could be used in two ways. The first one, the teacher could evaluate the podcasts and have feedback and information on the students' needs and what if there are gaps or misconceptions, etc. But also the teachers could promote peer assessment, and they could give the podcasts to their peers, to students' peers, to ask them to evaluate and give them feedback on the progress of their learning and their work, based always on specific criteria that could be taught before to students, as to know before what's expected from them and how to evaluate the work. So this is, I think, this is a good type and interesting and contemporary mean of formative assessment in nowadays classrooms.
I like that. And what that, remember, we are all about all learners learning and in a safe and inclusive environment. And if you think, I mean, the things that you were saying, and you were saying about this anonymity, you don't know why, that's fairly safe for learners who might feel, I'm not so sure if I'm doing the right thing now, and I will not try, I'm not going to raise my hand. All of these digital tools are saying, you know what, I can do it. Someone will tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I'm trying. And then what you are saying with the podcast, for example, maybe writing an essay for someone, the writing process, I'm not a good speller, and if I do a podcast and I talk about it, I'm still getting my ideas out there, and it's done in a inclusive way. Of course, maybe for someone who is deaf, for example, we can have videos as well. So it's not limited to podcasts, but the idea is that alternate ways of doing things that we've done all these years. And as I was saying, you know, learners are so exposed to the digital world out there and the social media and TikTok and when they do this, they critique. It's like, oh, does she think she looks like Rihanna? Or, you know, this. So now this time they're going to say, oh, is your essay a good essay? Are you giving me the information? But then again, we would use some of, you were talking about it, where you have this grid beforehand. What are the things that must be there? It must be clear, like you would do in writing. So the same kind of strategies must be clear. It must have all this information. It must have an introduction. It must have an end. So it's just a different way of doing it. And so you're actually getting students to do the same thing, but in a different format. And that makes learning so much more exciting. I don't know about you guys, but these experts are good and they know a lot. Now, when we are going to write a book chapter on this, and then we're going to tell you all about that. So this is not the end of this great examples that we have given you. There are loads more. We just don't have the time. We need to wrap it up. So, in summary, and please remind me if I forget anything. All of this happens and has to happen in this safe, inclusive learning environment where everybody is part of the assessment. And this fear for some learners who might have some learning problems and issues, the mere fact that, as you say, Malika, you need to know that learner, and so the assessment will match up, and it could be the same assessment, because that's what we'll be saving time, right? Same assessment, but for this learner, it may be a different. You don't have to write the whole chapter or the whole paragraph. You can write 3 sentences. And so whatever the teacher decides is the criteria for that for that learner or for those learners, it is there, and it's safe, inclusive learning environment. Everybody learns. And you take the learner to the next step and take to the next step. And I mean, when you do these strategies, you say, that was fun. I enjoyed it. Did they enjoy it? And you ask them, did you like that? And they, yeah, we like doing that. So more of the same. So you think, they like that. Again, to their learning profiles. This is what they like. You know, so we move forward. All of this means nothing for the main reason why we are here, the learners, right? So the main aim is for learners to learn. And so taking Janneke's 5 strategies, there's a learning intention and there's success criteria that we want learners to do. And this is the aim of formative assessment. We want to move learners to the point where they are successful. They've met the learning criteria. Am I right? Yeah. And so student teachers, when you're out, and remember we're looking for critical thinkers. None of this, I give to you, you regurgitate and give it back to me. We want them to think differently. And so these strategies help to do that, which is different from, you know, possibly summative assessment and so on. Now, as student teachers, you tell yourself, so how do I get started? You gave me such a lot of information. How do I get started? You saw what these gurus were telling you about, these experts were telling you about. You saw that they started small. Thumbs up, thumbs down, 1, 2, 3, whiteboards going up. So there's such a lot of things that you can learn from that. So you can start small, and then you grow and you expand your formative assessment knowledge so that you can be an effective teacher. So you, as student teachers, know such a lot. And as Janneke will say, you know, as people who are a bit older, we don't know everything, but these students are so fast. And you are those student teachers who are going to go into a classroom and you can make the difference. And you, maybe the older generation have issues about formative assessment, but we just gave you good tips for doing formative assessment that will make your learners learn. And you will be that great teacher that we want you to be.